President Muhammadu Buhari says that he has done his best in solving Nigeria's many problems since his administration came into office in May 2015. President Buhari also said there is a need to raise generations of youth devoid of religious extremism and bigotry. Arise analysts Frank Tietie and Dr. Sam Amadi joins us now to speak on the president's statement about having done his best and ready to retire to his Daura home country. Good day to you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. Well, Dr. Sam Amadi, Yes, you're welcome. Dr. Sam Amadi, let me start with you. What do you make of the president's comments that he has done his best for Nigeria, even though he did, acknowledge that it seems that his best is not good enough? How should Nigerians who are facing difficult and challenging times interpret that? Does that offer any sort of comfort? Is it supposed to elicit sympathy? How do you interpret that statement?
Well, first, I think the president has significant candor, sometimes in the way he describes how he feels. We recall that when he came back from a medical trip, he said, "I've never been this sick." The other time he said, "I think, look, I'm tired. I just want to get out of here." So essentially, we have to give him the mark of candor. Now, I think probably the second leg of that statement is truer than the first. He wishes his best has not been good enough. He probably could have done better. He has margin of improvement. Maybe starting with how he constituted his cabinet. Maybe starting with how he dealt with opposition or dealt with insights from the media, from people outside government. So hindsight is 40-40. So he could go back and see that probably he could have done better. But the basic line is, look, the president has done his best probably, but clearly not good enough. So the customers or consumers, citizens who are going through hardship this season, dealing with high cost of energy, non-availability of fuel, prices going off the roof. We've seen these days Arise News interviews, analysis on it. They would probably say, look, regret maybe they voted for him in 2025, 2019. They would say this is not the bargain, what we expected. So a bit of buyer remorse there, a bit of regret and disappointment. But again, maybe it will now, like the president argued, say, look, elect people who will do a better job. Maybe it will also fire the citizens to say, you know what, this time around, maybe we got to ask more questions than we did. We're going to look at people's competencies shown by what they have done in the past. Let's not forget, maybe for different circumstances, when the president was here before as head of state, it was the darkest time in Nigeria's economy. We had the highest inflation rate. We had Naira devaluation at the worst of it. So essentially, if they had asked for better particulars, as the lawyers would say, they probably wouldn't have elected him at that point. So the customer, the consumers, the citizens who are grieving, going through hardship, would probably say, well, Mr. President, thank you for your candor, but lesson is, you know what, we're going to probably ask more questions, look at people's antecedents, look at their credentials, look at how qualified they are for the job, maybe look less on the rhetoric around change and some of the highfalutin political campaigns, and know that, look, when after the polls are over, we're going to deal with governance, and it's not going to be easy. Again, they can also say, you know what, we forgive Mr. President, he probably did his best, not good enough, but then we're going to look forward to who will now clear the table, who will now reset the system again, and maybe we could walk back to a better economic outcome, lower inflation, more food. Look at the issue of insecurity. A part of this crisis of local foods, food not competing with foreign food and not being available, it's also because of what insecurity has done to the agricultural belt of this country. You had a policy on border control that didn't make much sense. Of course, you have to put local, in fact, industry through helping them with R&D, improving their efficiency, but not basically crude border closure that further aggravated, reduced access to inputs and also worsened conditions. So they're going to look back at some of these policies and say, you know what, we didn't make the right choice. Maybe going forward, we'll make the right choice. But essentially, give it to him, the candor He said, look, not good enough. And that is true from the president saying so himself. He hasn't got a great job, but he has been truthful to say, I think I didn't do a great job, but I did my best.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Amadi. Let me ask Frank Tietie, who is also with us. Some say that the one thing that has really improved since Buhari the only thing that has improved since Buhari has been in office is his health. What is your assessment of the Buhari administration and the claims that, that he feels a bit harassed and he's tried his best, even though his best isn't enough?
All right, thank you. Our president was clearly overwhelmed in the last 7 years plus by the Herculean problems of leadership in our country. He didn't really bargain for that. He thought he was going to issue military decrees and fiats the way he did when he was a major general in the army. So well, he now realized that he needed to also play politics, a politics that he didn't actually play well. He left many people fallen. He left many people disappointed because he had a messianic status. He was seen as the redeemer of the Nigerian situation from the dark days and rudderless government of President Goodluck Jonathan. Now, in comparison with the past, Nigerians are sounding a tone of regret. And so the president, however well-intentioned he has been, has shown that when he took too much on himself, he acknowledged too much before now. Indeed, the president proved many wrong. He survived all these years when people didn't give it to him. His health has indeed become better. Many thought that he was going to struggle leading Nigeria in terms of exhibiting physical strength. He's done much better in that regard. The president has also shown that he will remain the most tenacious personality in the history of this country, having contested to become president 4 times, lost 3 times, and eventually won, thanks to the APC, the CPC, and the Tinubu-led alliance of democracy that eventually, APC, I mean, that eventually, ACN, I would say, that eventually delivered him, the presidency to him. And then he became president, and his presidency experienced the most divisive, Nigerian society post the Civil War, where he made statements, however innocuous he thought the statements were. They were very dangerous to Nigeria's unity, that certain parts of the country, only 5% voted for him. And then the Nigerians felt so much nepotism, even though going back to history, the Fulani race hasn't been the most nepotistic race in our history. But they always felt that the way he handled the farmer headers crisis, and then ultimately you go to the judiciary, where he supervised the removal of a Chief Justice of Nigeria without due process. So what you can give to Buhari is that he's probably leaving a country that will be more circumspect, that will take its time to now decide on who becomes the next leader. There will no longer be bandwagon effects. It will be difficult. If you look back in 2015, even in 2016, when the whole world embraced Buhari, a very fantastic opportunity that no leader in Nigeria's history, not even Obasanjo, has had. But that was not translated into the goodwill. But you also commend Buhari for not so laissez-faire approach, but the fact that he didn't, interfere in the internal politics of APC the way other presidents before him did. One would have seen the strong arm tactics of Obasanjo being replicated in the choice of his successor. He didn't do that. He allowed, the forces to play out without his interference. That's quite commendable. But the president has indeed left many people disappointed. But to also think that he means well for the country, as he intends not to allow any form of activity, whether from the military or any sort of persons, to truncate this long-standing democracy we've enjoyed since 1999, is something that will go down well in memory as his legacy.
Now, Dr. Sam Amadi, the president also talked about some people who he said made attempts to undermine his administration. He talked about being harassed, about some people trying to intimidate him, which to me seems to be further confirmation that indeed the cabal does exist. Now, my question is, why is it so difficult to name and shame this cabal? Why is it so difficult to render them powerless? He is the president of the country after all. And then also, the second part of my question is, how then will his performance reflect on his party, the APC, as we go into 2023?
Well, I think any notion of a cabal, constraining the performance of a president under our constitution is a self-inflicted problem. The Nigerian president, like executive presidents, the model we use, the US model, less so like Germany, where such presidency is a little bit in between parliamentary and presidential. But in the Nigerian model, even less so the French model, the president is actually chief executive. So the presidency doesn't exist, legally speaking. The Section 5 says executive power is in the president, who exercises it either by himself, by his vice, by his ministers, or any other person. Now that any other person becomes what we call the presidency, the aides, chief of staff, and all the other aides. But what happens in real life is that the president's weakness transfers power to some faceless persons, whether it's Obasanjo's government, whether it's Jonathan's government, whether it's Buhari's government. So the president, no president has any plea for fait accompli, act of God. Some persons took over my government. You are the president, you allow them, you could fire them. And Buhari has a certain proclivity. He doesn't fire anybody for incompetence. He fires people when it becomes gross disloyalty or when the person has changed political camp. Otherwise, there are many people who should have gone in this government. So he takes responsibility for his failure to assemble the right team, to have assembled persons based more on loyalty, on some kind of, if you like, anachronistic considerations of piety, friendship, whatever. So he's stuck with that. Again, he had opportunity, also every president has an opportunity to reinvent his presidency during the 8-year tenure. So when you win an election, you can reinvent and bring in better persons. So if you do that and it didn't work, you have a problem. But again, back to the APC aspect of it. In democracy, partisan democracy is usually by default a two-party de facto, even if it's 10 parties. The party in power after 8 years usually should lose power, except something, maybe they did extraordinarily well, or some kind of accident, war, and so on, can reauthorize them. If they do well, they continue. But the usual expectations, after 8 years, the electors would like to make a choice, especially if economic, national calamities or international issues create headwinds that lead to, like today, whether in the US, you see inflation is up, everything is up, and people expect that the Democrats should have lost control of the Congress and the Senate. But unfortunately, because of bad management of the electoral process, bad candidates, the Democrats had, marginally to Senate win and lost the House of Reps. So in Nigeria, would that happen? Now, 3 factors to consider. One is that once the president is not on the ticket, there's a sense in which everybody thinks everything Buhari did is Buhari's problem. And so the APC candidate can run on the sense that, look, even though, yes, it's our party, but look, I'd have done a better job. That's a very thin line to walk, because you have to make sure you don't damage the presidency and make it more of a lame duck by distancing yourself from it and trying to paint it black, in which case you score an own goal. The presidency gets angry, and in a third world country, they can pull the rug off your feet. So you got to be careful to say, well, they did well, we're going to continue and we're going to do better, which is what Tinubu does. The second factor that contributes is the strength of the opposition. The PDP also didn't do a good job of being an opposition party. They unlike APC in 2014, that created itself in diametrical opposite to PDP and became populist and built up a narrative of failure, of corruption and inefficiency, incompetence, and made itself the champion of a mass movement. PDP didn't do that very well, in fact, not at all. And so they are now stuck with, are they truly an alternative to a APC that has evidently failed? They're not, closing the deal. And then Labour Party is just coming in and basically doing the job PDP should have done. But look, the time, the structure to become the real alternative, so that people just walk away from APC and straight to Labour. They have not yet closed the deal. So you might see APC, in spite of 7 years that the prince says, look, I didn't do a good job, still winning election because of these three factors. One is that politics is not responsive to that duality of ruling party and opposition. And secondly, because the opposition party didn't do a good job of recreating itself as an alternative, but making itself look a little bit like this, a little bit like the ruling party. And thirdly, because the political market here is not, we say in economics, elasticity of demand. When the price goes up, people say, you know what, we're going to buy this, we'll go to alternatives. In our political market, when people fail, we don't necessarily say we go to the X, because they are our brothers, we are pandering to sentiment, ethnic, religious, geopolitics, several factors, or we are basically trapped electorates who are bought over by our principals, and our principals are still supporting that mandate. So we might see some degree of impact of Buhari's failure on APC. But for these three factors, it should have been open and closed for APC. There's no way a party that for 8 years didn't deliver the job would have been elected in any modern democracy where the political market is responsive to demand and to price and to outcome. But here, they still have a fighting chance to win the election in spite of clear, poor job the president has done in the last 8 years.
Thank you, Dr. Amadi, for that. Frank Tietie, let me come to you and ask you a similar question as well. From the performance of the APC in the past few years, do you feel like the PDP has done enough to present themselves as a more shiny alternative, or do you feel like the APC will completely take the ticket coming in February 2023 with their seemingly poor performance in the last 8 years? Very briefly, because we're almost out of time.
The APC doesn't agree that he has done poorly. He keeps giving a lot of excuses. That's up to Nigerians to accept whether those excuses are tenable. The personalities involved matter a lot. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he has paid his dues, whether we like it or not. He contributed significantly to the emergence of President Muhammadu Buhari. Expectedly, the Buhari-led administration should have used its incumbential powers to sway the instruments of state and use of government machinery to enable him to win the presidency. That has not been ruled out. The APC government, federal government, intends to do that, and usually, whether we like it or not, logistics and the management of security forces have a way of influencing elections. The APC can use that. So in my humble reasoning, the coming elections might just go the APC way because the PDP remains a divided house. It is not offering anything different from what the APC has done. Then the attraction, the allure of having a Southern president after an 8-year tenure of a Northern Muslim Fulani presidency is something that is going to be very difficult to shift. That's why the election for some of us is being called for the APC. Despite the growing popularity of Peter Obi, some of us still believe in the importance of structure, which he lacks. He's unable to face the formidable structure the APC has put together, combined with his incumbential powers and then the personality of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So yes, the APC hasn't done well. There are a lot of excuses, but it still stands a very strong chance of winning the elections in 2023.
Well, Dr. Sam Amadi and Mr. Frank Tietie, Arise News analyst, thank you so much for joining us for this very insightful discussion.